When one thinks of battle tanks, names like the American Abrams, the German Panther, and the Russian T-14 Armata come to mind. However, in the early days of tanks, various forms and sizes were designed and tested. Some would prove hugely successful and influence tank design even to this day, but others, not so much. What was the tank known as the Tsar Tank? Why was it designed like a kid's tricycle? And whatever happened to it? Let's try and find out. Hello, I'm Mike Droberg, a Marine Corps veteran and filmmaker, and we will try to answer these questions on today's episode of Forgotten History. The Tsar Tank, effectively a gigantic armored tricycle with guns, was an innovative tank design for sure, but it would ultimately end in failure. The Tsar Tank was also called Netopyr, a Russian name for the Pipistrellus, a genus of bats, or the Lebedenko Tank, after its main tank designer, Nikolai Lebedenko. Other engineers involved in the project were Nikolay Zhukovsky, Boris Stechkin, and Alexander Mikulin, who all worked on the tank in 1914 and 15. Resembling something straight out of a dystopian science fiction film, the tank had 3 wheels instead of tracks that most people associate with tank technology. Lebedenko had a private laboratory on Sadovo-Kudrinskaya Street in Moscow, where he conducted his work for the Russian military. On January 15th, Lebedenko showed Tsar Nicholas II a wooden model of his tank with a propulsion system made from a gramophone spring. According to eyewitness accounts, the Tsar and the engineers played with the model of the machine that moved quickly across the carpet, effortlessly passing stacks of 2 or 3 volumes of the Code of Laws of the Russian Empire books. Tsar Nicholas was so impressed by the tank that he gave several 100,000 rubles from his own money, or the people's money for that matter, to help fund the project. Allegedly, Nicholas kept the tank model that Lebedenko made out of wood, but its whereabouts are now lost to history. With funding secured, the development of a working prototype commenced at a plant in Kamovniki. 2 240 horsepower Maybach engines, which were sourced from a captured German airship, powered the tank and were set up 1 engine per wheel to make the drive unit. The engines allowed for a top speed of 10 miles per hour on level ground, which was pretty fast back then. The front 2-spoke wheels were almost 30 feet across, and the third roller wheel in the back had a diameter of 5 feet. Lebedenko's memoirs say that he got the idea for this machine from Turkic Povosky carts, which easily drove over bumps and ditches because of their large wheels. The wheels, which Zhukovsky made, had a T-shaped steel beam in the middle, which was then covered with wood. Each engine turned a wheel, which was then pushed down by a railway carriage spring until it touched the wooden cover of the big wheel. The wheel then transferred the power from the engine to the big running wheel by turning in the opposite direction. If the engine got too hot, the drive wheels came off, which kept the engine from seizing. The top of the vehicle's hull would have had 1/3 of MG or light cannons, most likely 4-pounders. The tank would also have a series of machine gun slots armed with 7.62mm maximum machine guns for anti-infantry defense. In addition, small MG sponsons were put on the outer sides of the hull, and under the belly there was also a small machine gun turret. This would give the Lebedenko a total height of about 39 feet. The Tsar Tank would weigh the incredible amount of 60 tons and had a crew of 10. Its armor thickness is unknown. The theory behind the design of the big wheels was to enable it to traverse over rough terrain and other large obstacles without issue, and the smaller rear wheel would provide the main steering for the tank. This seemed reasonable in theory, but when field tested, the rear steerable roller became stuck in the soft ground almost as soon as the test began. Despite the incredible power of the main engines, even they lacked the power to free the machine once it got mired down in the mud. Due to the small size of the rear wheels and the incorrect weight distribution of the machine as a whole, the tendency for the rear wheel to get stuck would prove to be a fatal design flaw and led to several further failed tests in front of the High Commission in August of 1915. The project would be canceled a month later, in September of that year. Despite this major setback, Stechkin and Mikulin continued to work on the design by attempting to develop a new engine, called Ambis, for the vehicle. This final push to save the project also failed, as did any attempts to extricate the stranded tank prototype. When the Russian Revolution of 1917 kicked off, that finally sealed its fate and ended any further work on the Tsar Tank. For a time, the tank was completely forgotten and left to rust for another 6 years in the forest, some 37 miles from Moscow. In 1923, the tank was finally scrapped. The Tsar Tank was undoubtedly one of the boldest tank designs in the history of tanks. While appearing sound in theory, ultimately it was a complete failure when tested in the field. A replica of the Tsar Tank can be seen in the T-34 Tank Museum in Moscow today. So what do you think? Should they try a second prototype? Let us know in the comments below.
Thank you for watching Forgotten History. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you have any comments or show ideas, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks again.